Hi, welcome to A Pathway to Compliance, where we talk to industry experts on all sorts of things, AI, technology, regulations. And with me today, I have Eric Zielinski. He is the CISO at Jumpmind. And Jumpmind is a retail technology company that spurs business transformation with cutting edge software built for speed, quality, and flexibility. I'm Sally Smozinski, your host. Eric, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Sally. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So, as a CISO, there's a whole lot of things that I have questions on. But before that, talk about your journey. How did you get to where you are today?
Sure. I've been in cybersecurity industry for over 20 years now. Not to really date myself, but I got involved in the late 90s. I actually started my IT career working for a telecom company during the dot-com boom, decided to become an internet service provider, and they were looking for people that wanted to learn how to do networking. So I've always been an avid learner, and so I jumped at that chance to pick up some system administration skills, some e-commerce skills, some troubleshooting skills, some networking skills. And that company ultimately ended up filing bankruptcy, and so I had to find my next role. And there was a little startup in town that was doing this thing called cybersecurity. I didn't know what it was, but they were looking for somebody that had my type of skill set. So as I learned more, I got the role. And I was literally trying to learn cybersecurity when there was only about 5 books on a bookshelf at the bookstore. There was no real cybersecurity degrees at the time. It was all about just kind of learning on the fly and networking with others that were kind of doing some of the same type of work. This was back in the day before there was even a SIM tool. I was looking
Mm.
at raw logs from firewalls and from intrusion detection sensors and trying to look for potential suspicious traffic in there. We were doing the very beginnings of vulnerability management and threat intel. I did that for a few years and then eventually moved into consulting where I did some attack and penetration testing. I eventually landed a role at Nationwide. I spent about 16 years there. I wore a lot of hats there. I started doing compliance and then moved into attack and penetration testing. But my love was digital forensics. So I did forensics for Nationwide for about 6 years ish and led a lot of their, really big investigations and really enjoyed that role. From there, I went into people leadership. I saw an opportunity to build out their cyber fusion center. I took that on and started to bring different teams together as we were all kind of siloed at the time, and then fell in love with people leadership. I built out their cyber defense team. I built out their threat intelligence team, and then moved into cloud operations at Nationwide. They were just starting their journey for cloud, and they were looking for somebody that was, passionate about new technology and innovation, and how could we help transform the company by going to cloud. I saw that as a great opportunity. I was the first person hired there. I built out a team of over 50 people, 5 different teams. A lot of those are still in existence today. And I decided I didn't really want to retire at Nationwide. I wanted some more experience. And so then I went into the life science industry to learn a completely different vertical. Working for Viva, I was running their global security operations team at the time. I did that for a few years. I started down the path of this CISO certification through Carnegie Mellon. So I did that program, learned a ton. I got like real live experience from CISOs, global CISOs, presented to, a mock board of a potential incident for a company. Took that and I decided, this is what I want to do next is I want to be a CISO. Landed my first CISO role for a small tech company that was doing desktop as a service called Dision. I really learned a lot in that role. And then I moved into the financial services industry where I got to work for a SIFMU, which is a highly regulated financial services organization. I think it stands for Systematically Important Market Financial Utility. And so I got a ton of experience with new types of regulation, a lot more auditing. They were also looking for somebody at the time to lead their AI transformation. Again, I've just always been passionate about new technology. And so I decided to go for that role. I landed that role and was building out their AI strategy and operations. And then eventually the CISO role at Jumpmind came my way. It was local. It sounded like a great opportunity to do something different, to get into retail tech. And, I've been with Jumpmind since last November and absolutely love it.
That is awesome. So, a lot of times, when people tell their story, it's very planned, it's very thought out. It sounds like you just kind of went with whatever was coming at you at the time, right? Not a lot of thought, just jumped in and look where you are today. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really kept me grounded in the cybersecurity field is
Mhm.
that it's constantly evolving and it's constantly changing. And you have to be adaptable to what the next threat is. And that is kind of how I built my career. It's like, oh, well, back in the day, threat intelligence didn't really exist in organizations, or, maybe forensics didn't really exist. And they started to evolve, and I started to see the field getting more broad, and there's different domains and there's different skill sets that you need in order to
Mhm.
do different roles. But also just being part of that and actually helping build it and actually contributing back to the community. Like I loved going to conferences and speaking at different types of conferences and sharing what I've learned, my experiences, my, past incidents that I've worked through, being able to share that back to the community and teach others too as well. It's been, but you're right. Yeah. Like I'm just kind of just seeing where the industry is going. And I'm like, okay, I think this is where it's going next. And I'm going to focus on learning that. I'm going to focus on diving deeper into AI or diving deeper into cloud. I'm going to become a subject matter expert. I start with very little materials, but then I just start to build and mature,
Yeah.
and learn, day after day, week after week, and then find other people that are doing the same work. And I learn so much from them too as well.
That's awesome. And the energy is clear. So that's it makes this a lot more exciting. So you're not a new CISO, but you're new to Jumpmind. So in your opinion, with all these things that you've seen and how AI is kind of evolved, who should own the risk in an organization for AI? Is it the CISO, the CIO, the risk officer, a dedicated team? What's your opinion?
I think that's a great question. And my answer at the moment in the current state of things is I feel like the CISO should own some of the risk as far as AI goes. Maybe even I'll even go as far as to say like lower level risks where, it's not going to impact the business, it's not going to impact the product that much. And then having more of like a AI governance council or committee
Mhm. Yeah.
that is made up of members that have voting rights that maybe approve different types of moderate risks. But I think the high risk or high critical risk to the business of any type of AI systems that you're deploying to your organization should ultimately be owned by top management. So like your CEO.
Right. Well, that's a good answer too, because I think it evolves and depends on the size of your organization. When we are implementing ISO 42001, which is the AI standard, we start with an AI impact assessment and we bring in key leaders. And it's amazing where they didn't know where AI was being used in their organization. And we have to look at it from multiple uses that it's being used to develop. So you're a development organization developing AI, you're a development organization using AI, right, to
Mhm.
help your product, or you're putting it in a product like Jumpmind, right? You guys have AI built into your product, and or you just use it. So the scope is everybody, right? And it's when you have a standard like that that's scoping just about any potential use, there isn't one ownership that I'm seeing, right? You have to have that governance go across the board, and everybody who's supposed to now become regulated with AI, just give it to IT. It always dumps on the CISO, and I think that that's a misstep. So I'm glad to hear that as a CISO, you see the broader requirements for governance.
Yeah, and I talk to CISOs all the time, and I get their perspectives on AI risk, and a lot of it is very they push back a lot, and
Mhm.
rightly so. There's probably some reasons to push back, but I feel like there's a lack of understanding sometimes as far as how it's affecting the business and like what the outcomes the business can actually achieve by using some of these tools. And so rather than like slowing it down or becoming a roadblock, like I'm trying to understand the use cases, trying to understand what are the efficiencies? What's the ROI that we're going to get as we deploy this AI solution? But then also like, what's the risk? To your point about those AI, system impacts assessments, like those are very important to really understand like
Mhm.
how you're building AI, whether it's your organization's using the tools, whether it's being built into the product, whether development teams using it, that type of thing. So I think that helps better understand what the overall risk is, and then you can articulate that to the leadership and let them make the final call and sign off on the risk if so.
The epiphanies of, oh, I didn't know we were using that, or I didn't know that that had AI in it, right? And when we talked earlier, you used the term interpretability.
Yeah.
Got it. So you've described it as a security control. Why should CISOs view that as a security issue rather than an AI research issue?
So that's a big question. I'd start by saying that I think that it's important to understand the models that are being deployed within your organization. To your point earlier, you're like, we didn't know we had AI in these products. We're investing in vendors, we're investing in frontier models, we're maybe running local models. And so having an inventory of those models is a great starting point. But the interpretability aspect becomes important through my lens because I don't really fully understand these models. I
Mhm.
don't think anybody fully understands these models. Even the vendors that are building these models, I don't think they fully understand it. And so my push is, how do we understand how models make decisions? So if we're
Mm.
relying on these models to make decisions for our business, they could be high risk decisions, they could be quick decisions, they could be low risk. How do we know how that model actually arrived at it? And what I'd like to see is more of a industry involvement, as far as like opening up the hood, seeing how all the wires are connected. When you ask it a question or you write a prompt, like, how does it actually know what answer to give you? Is it giving you the right answer? And that's where I feel like, you know, AI, is almost like a security failure in a sense, until we can understand what that
Mhm.
interpretability problem actually is. So you think about things like data poisoning, or you think about things like fraud model evasion, or like, hallucinations and like high consequence workflows, or prompt injection defenses that are just guessing without actually understanding. Like, if you're using some of these agents to, let's say, do incident response or to triage a security incident, and you're relying on the model's decision making ability without having an understanding or visibility of it, it becomes a black box essentially.
Right. Right.
And so what I built is a framework called Circuit, which helps us build a framework and build a measurement around these models. So from my perspective, if we're running a model locally, we have the most visibility and the most control over it, right? There's different types of open source tools out there that you can leverage that can show you how the circuits work and how the different patterns are called. You can even subscribe to like a third party. There's now like third party companies that are helping you do this type of thing.
Okay.
If you're using like an API to like Anthropic or to an open AI, you've got a lot less visibility, and you're relying on the vendors' benchmarks and the vendors'
Mhm.
scorecards. And they do a great job explaining them. But if you ever go through one of those model cards, you can actually see sometimes their comments are like, "Well, we don't fully truly understand what this model is doing, because it's like it's a brand new brain, and we don't know how it's going to actually grow and how it's going to evolve and how it's going to actually end up making
Right.
decisions." And then the highest risk is when we're relying on vendors, and those vendors are using different types of models in their products, and we're using those products in our business to run our business, and we don't understand how they're updating the models. We don't understand even what models they're using. Oftentimes, they just do things behind the scenes and they make updates, and we just go with it. So we don't know. So
Right.
this framework just allows you to have a little bit more of a measurement stick, something that you can use for your auditors and for regulators, and to actually provide evidence that we're actually doing due diligence as far as how we're actually deploying these models within our organization.
Well, good for you. Thank you for that. I'm sure that it's underutilized, right? It's probably something that a lot of us need to take a look at. But you said a couple things that are interesting. So you said when AI makes a decision.
Yep.
So I'm outside of Chicago, and Chicago has a really strong tech group that goes on. We have multiple professional associations that we all play together, and almost every week there's something incredible going on here. And we've gotten into many, many conversations about just, should you let AI make the decision or should it make a recommendation? And so now, like, we're seeing, if you're Googling something in Gemini, it's giving you the sources, or at least referencing some of the sources in which it got that information. So where are you in the comfort level that AI can make a decision, or should it just make the recommendation and let you decide?
I think there's risk in just letting the human decide. The more advanced these models get, and the more automation and more workflows we build around it, and we put a human in charge of making the decision, it starts to become like one of those things where, I don't know if you've used Claude Code before or not, but I've used a bunch of Claude Code and I ask it to do something and it says, "Do you approve?" And it says yes or no. And then I'll say yes. And then it'll ask me another question and say yes. And that repetitive motion of just clicking the box and clicking yes, just so you can get through and you can move on to something else. Human error is one of the biggest risks that we're going to have from a cybersecurity perspective. And I feel like by having a human make all the decisions for the AI, we're still going to have the wrong decisions being made because it's just not going to be vetted properly. It's just going to become like a mechanical, response. And so I think there's a lot of, opportunity to have the AI make the decision if you understand the risks that, you're putting that agentic system into for your use case or for the actual business process that it's making the decision on. You know, I think I could go on and on about this. In the interest of time, I'll just pause here. But I think about just like if you put it into a hospital and it's making critical decisions for a patient, or it's approving claims, and your company could potentially lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. At the end of the day, if you rely on AI to make that decision, somebody's going to come to you, the engineer or the architect or whoever built the AI system, and say, you're going in front of the board and you have to explain why you deployed the system and how AI made that decision. And oftentimes you won't have that answer.
Right. So yes, this could be a whole 2 hours of that conversation. So I had a couple of questions I was thinking of, and I'll just let those lie too. So let's kind of go to the next level here. So when a model behaves unexpectedly, right, or if it's expected because there's some nefarious activity going on behind it, what should a proper AI incident response look like?
I mean, it starts with your incident response playbooks that you've always known. But one of the things that I think needs to happen is you need to constantly revisit those playbooks and update them. You need to redesign your tabletops for AI related attacks or incidents or vulnerabilities. You need to, I think, have even like AI security tooling, that can against some of these types of attacks. And they need to be tested. But that's one of the things that we were just working on this week is we're like, well, we know that, as these models get better and better, and we're hearing about them breaking out of sandboxes and, doing things that they're not supposed to be doing, it's a matter of time before that starts to infiltrate to our businesses. And so how would we respond if something like that actually occurred? What AI tooling would we use? How are our playbooks updated? Who would be notified? How quickly can our tools even respond to some of these types of attacks? I think we might get to the point where our tools just aren't fast enough, and the attackers and the models and the tools that they're using are so fast that our tools can't detect them. And I hope we don't get there, but it's quite possible with how intelligent these things I think are becoming.
I had a conversation with someone the other day, and they're an advocate for having AI code for AI.
Yeah.
And that left me in a little dizzy space for a while.
I did. I saw a talk on that, I think from Anthropic. They used Claude Code to write Claude Code.
That's crazy. Well, I mean, and that's what's happening, right? And so we just have to have that governance piece. And I think that regardless of whether we're talking AI, cybersecurity, privacy, it's a governance matter, right? And so when you look at governance, let's see, what should you prioritize in that? Should you look at the governance for highly regulated industry, like for if you're highly regulated, or if it's a security team, or is it just everybody? There's really no differentiation when you're prioritizing the governance.
I think what you're asking is just more around like policy, guardrails, controls for different types of industries. And from my experience, I can say, coming from a highly regulated financial services organization, compliance was like one of our highest priorities, right? We had to ensure that every T was crossed, every I was dotted. We had a policy in place. We had everybody reviewing those policies on a regular basis, signing off on them, building new policies for, new things like MCP servers and AI and all the different technology stacks that are coming out, and just really making sure that there was a rigorous process around everything. It took a long time to get things across the finish line, but there was reasoning for that. And I think it depends on the business that you're in, right? I mean, you work in, different types of, like when I was in life science, like there
Hmm.
was heavy focus also on compliance as well, mostly on the quality side of things because we're dealing with all these big pharma type of companies and they've got heavy processes implemented and they need to ensure that the company that they're using for their CRM solution is also doing the same type of a thing and that they meet their certain standards and qualities. And then you go into smaller tech companies, it's not as rigorous, there's not as much process in place, and so you have a little bit more freedom. It's a little bit more, lenient on things that you can do and you can't do. You can get things across the finish line a lot faster. There's not
Hmm.
as much red tape. There's not as much, bureaucracy that you have to go through, which makes it exciting. But it also makes you question, did you miss something? Like, did
Right.
you go too fast? Is there some process that should have been in place that's not in place?
That's awesome. So earlier you mentioned metrics. So let's talk about metrics for a second, because I don't think we've brought that up in any of the conversations I've had so far. So what metrics would best indicate that, and let's just go for the AI governance side of it. How do you know that that program is actually effective rather than compliant?
That is a really, really great question. I would say a couple things that you think about from an AI side. Do you understand your models that you have? Do you understand any agents that you're running? Do you understand the risk that those agents could potentially be imposing? So having almost like a registry of each agent and what those agents can access from a data perspective, what tools they call, what permissions they have on those tools, what identities that they use, and then building some metrics around that shows, okay, well, we know we have these types of agents deployed in our environment. This is the risk that they impose because they touch maybe our critical data, or maybe they don't touch critical data, or maybe they touch PII, or maybe they touch, different types of
Hmm.
PCI data. Um, Having insight visibility into that, I think having overall understanding of the vendors and how the vendors actually attest to maybe like a questionnaire. So ensuring that when you are engaging with the vendors that you're starting to ask AI related questions. I know we get a lot of RFPs and some of the ones that I've seen lately have a lot of questions around AI, how what frameworks are you using? How are you assessing your AI systems? How does the AI, have security baked into it? And so any metrics that you can build that are going to show a customer that, hey, we've actually got a program in place. We've, visibility. We've got SLAs tied to, our risk. We're writing up any of those risks into our risk register. We've got inventory of our agents. We've got inventory of our models. We understand the risks that each model imposes, whether it's a local model, whether it's through an API, or whether it's a vendor model. That's a really, really powerful story to tell, I think. And I think that we're still in the infancy of creating metrics around AI. So it's a great question. I'd like to hear what others think about that too
Yeah,
as well,
I'll
because
ask it again.
I
Yeah.
think we're all trying to. I think we're all trying to figure out what that looks like. I get a lot of questions from our board as far as what we're doing from AI and how much risk we're imposing, and then obviously there's the major concern around cost too as well. I think
So when you
tokenomics is real, and
yeah,
people are wanting to know how much you're spending on it and why we're spending on it and how we're getting the ROI based on that spend.
that's good. So when you were explaining, sort of the inventory of things, my brain is thinking of a CMDB,
Yep.
right? So it's exactly like that, but more complex, right? So there's no tools out there that will probably build that for you. You'd have to build it yourself, but there's a hint there. Maybe we've just created something new that people can work on. So in the role of CISO, it's strategy and governance, right? And you're trying to keep everybody safe, reduce risk. So how do you, as a CISO, use AI to support your role?
I start and end my day every day with Claude. Um, I rely on it, continuously because it is a very efficient mechanism that allows me to get information very, very quickly. However, I've spent a lot of time training and learning how to use it effectively versus just using it like a Google search. And so, I dove deep into prompt engineering, understanding context engineering, and now there's this new thing called graph engineering that I'm learning about. And what that's done is I look back, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I first started using some of these tools, and I was very much a beginner. I didn't really know what I was doing. I saw the capabilities and the power that AI had, but it wasn't until I actually started spending those times and really truly understanding what these tools can do and how powerful that they can be. And I think that's really made it more effective for my role today as a CISO. So I have
Mhm.
got multiple agents that I'm leveraging for expertise that understand different types of ISO standards, that understand different types of PCI and SOC 2 certifications. And so when I have a question, I've built the agents to have the right skill sets, to have the right knowledge, to have the right documentation. I can interact with it when I need something quickly.
That's cool. And
Um,
and so that obviously is going to evolve, but you have the agreement with your leadership that you can use it yourself, right? Not just practice it in what in things that you've purchased, but to do it to help you in your job. I don't ask that question a lot, and now I think I'm going to have to ask that even to our clients because we're talking to the C levels, and are you using it, and to what level?
yeah,
So
yeah,
this is
and I'll say, yeah, maybe more of like a tinkerer, because I've always just had that. I'm always been a builder, and so I always like to explore and try to new things. And even the concept of, people kind of make fun of vibe coding, or some people really love it, some people hate it. It's helped me build dashboards, visualizations, be able to tell a story very quickly, be able to build board decks, be able to build different types of documentation that normally would have taken me hours, days, weeks
right.
to build. And now it's just within, I can have multiple sessions up and running, and I've got, outputs, and then I can tweak it and, edit it as needed. I've even went as far as like starting to build out like an agentic security operations center and having agents do level one triage and handing off to other agents to do deeper investigations and then escalating to humans as needed, and continuing to just mature on that. And I'm just starting some of those journeys, but I do see value like immediately as soon as I start building them.
That's awesome. Well, an innovator, that's what you are. You're an innovator. I love that. So I want to thank you so much. Again, we could probably go on for hours, and I think that there might be some opportunities to, follow on and other conversations as you create some of these things. But my one final question to you is, what do you feel is the biggest unmanaged AI risk facing enterprises today?
I still feel like it is model governance and understanding. And that's why I got so passionate about building, Circuit. I
Mhm.
really wanted to better understand how these models make decisions. And I think for us to rely on, vendors model or using Chinese models or local models, there's so many out there. They just continue to be reproduced and updated and be better than the last without truly understanding how they arrive at decisions. That I think is one of the major risks. And if we can't actually assign a risk tier to it, we can't actually put a score to it. How are we going to explain it to, some of these auditors? Like, so just one quick example, like the European Union AI Act, I think that's coming out here really soon. Even the NIST, AI, RMF, the risk management framework, like they're saying you should have an understanding of interpretability of how these models do it. We're not going to tell you how to do it, but you should do it.
Right,
Right. So
right.
that's why I built that framework, because I'm like, this doesn't exist today. And so, if there's anybody that's interested in it, like, they can go to circuitframework.org. It's totally open source. It's not a product we're selling. I'm looking for people that, are passionate about this space and really want to help us, make better decisions from a risk perspective. And I think this framework is a starting point. I don't think we'll ever get to the point where we can actually see inside of a model and everything that it does. Maybe we will, but
Right.
I still think we're ways away from it. But that's probably one of the bigger risks that I see.
Okay. Well, that was a big answer. And that was a great answer.
Thank you.
So Eric, I thank you. I know that our audience is going to really get a lot from this conversation, and I appreciate it. And for those watching, thank you for spending your time with us, and we'll see you at the next podcast.
Thanks.